Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special panel discussion, The View from the C-Suite. This is a collaboration actually between IBTV, my colleague here, Georgie Makin, and The Medicine Maker. My name is Rich Whitworth. I'm the content director at The Medicine Maker. We're joined by a fantastic trio who probably need no introduction, but I should give a short one. Miguel Forte, CEO of Kiji Therapeutics, Angela Osborne, CEO of Exmoor Pharma, and Sven Kili, who's a partner at Saisei Ventures. And I say that with confidence because I lived in Japan for 5 years. Welcome. We're going to shake up the format probably of what you've seen thus far today. But before we get into our discussion here at Advanced Therapies 2025 in London, perhaps we can just get a quick overview of how day one has gone. From your perspective, particularly as chair, has it gone to plan?
It has gone to plan. I think the plan was to get people engaged on the discussions, understanding where we are, which is a challenging environment, but understanding where we can go, which is a bright future, bringing value to patients. People are gathering around discussions, attending. So for me, it went well according to expectations, delivering what I wanted. I hope the others felt the same.
Angela?
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a really good day, actually, much better than I thought it was going to be. I've walked around and met pretty much everybody I know, and that's been lovely. And I've been to some good panel sessions, and they've also been good. So yes, I'm really happy with how it's gone today. Thank you.
And Sven?
Thanks, Rich. First of all, thanks very much for inviting the trio of us up here. You're a very brave man.
We've only got 40 minutes, Sven. I
Yes.
guess. More on you now.
So for me, I think it's been really interesting. Compare and contrast to last year and the year before, where things have been a little more dour, a little more concentrated. I think this time, and thank you, Miguel, for setting the tone. I think the sun definitely came out today. People feel a lot more positive.
Okay.
I chaired a session on investing a little bit earlier today, and one thing that struck me was there was a lot more engagement from the audience, a lot more questions being asked, a lot more specifics being looked for. So I think definitely it's really interesting, a very much more positive environment today, and a lot busier than I remember for the first day last year. So definitely good.
Fantastic. So let's kick the discussion underway. You've framed it very nicely, Miguel, because we're going to start in relatively stormy seas. If we get the next slide, if it works, doesn't really matter. Stormy seas. So there are some challenges, I think, this year in particular that have slightly changed the game. There have been elements of news that have crossed my desk. I won't name them right now, but there are shifts in administration in certain parts of the world. There is a sizable shift in the landscape that this field now finds itself operating in. So we wanted to touch upon these stormy seas, and I guess the overall question is: should we be worried? But Georgie is going to dig in with a slightly more specific question to my fluffy intro.
I suppose coming from your different perspectives, what is the impact that you feel some of this, I suppose, tumultuous news has had on the CGT industry? What impact does it continue to have, and what impact may it have, and how are we framing that and looking at that right now?
Miguel?
I'll kick it off. I think we should always understand that biotech, cell and gene therapy, they're not easy endeavors, right? I mean, we need to fight for it. Being resilient, having perseverance, having the passion to believe on what you're doing is important. So I wouldn't say that the adverse winds are not unusual and we should be prepared for them. I actually do agree that the macro environment is bringing us additional things, impacting on uncertainty, leading to risk aversion, which again, it's part of the texture. I think it's particularly important to understand in terms of, I mentioned that before, in terms of funding an investment, be it public or private, I think there's an opportunity for Europe to wake up and actually do more about it, like it's waking up for other things, like defense, so to speak. So it is an opportunity that we need to seize. So I mean, I always like to look at things with a half full glass. And I think the challenges we're having will make us stronger and will leave better value to patients. Um, it is the role of the business that we're in.
Absolutely. Angela, go
I
ahead.
think from my perspective, this has been going on now for 2 years. Yes, we've had a change in administration, which has kind of added to it. But what we can be certain of is that there's a lot of uncertainty. And as one of my investors put it to me was, this is the new normal. Let's just get on with it. And if you think about it like that, you stop whinging. You find solutions, innovative solutions. So for us, collaboration is one of our key cornerstones. We need that more than ever just now, and we need to come up with innovative solutions to work with our clients so that we can help them navigate these difficult times when they can't get funding, and they can help us through these difficult times. And I think we're finding ways to do that. And I think rather than whinge about it, I think we've just got to get used to it and move on.
And that we have, two CEOs here of companies with that theme in mind. That is almost like a mindset, right? To stop whinging and move on. How do you lead your companies through that trouble? You said it, times of uncertainty, it can be difficult, for a CEO for sure, but it's also difficult for the team, working behind that. How do you keep the spirit alive, the passion going? Is it a case of, you know, we know what we're fighting for? Can you just
Well,
comment on that?
I think we've, from our perspective, we've got to show results to our teams that we have work coming in, that we have happy clients, that that we're succeeding. And one of the things we've done is to recognize that where there's a shortage of funding, particularly for early phase therapies, which is where most of our clients are sitting, we have to cover more ground. That means we need a bigger BD team. That means, we have to be able to demonstrate that we're seeing more people, we're having more conversations, and that encourages the rest of the team.
And Sven, sorry, Miguel, from an investment point of view, how does it look from your side of the fence, if there is a fence? It's probably a bit harsh.
Yeah, it's slightly harsh. Let's call it a gulch. So I think, maybe referring, back to this question, it's, one of my bosses once said to me when we were undergoing a potential acquisition, it was control your own space. So we can only control what we can control. We cannot control the US electorate. We cannot control what's happening, much further east in Russia. We can only control what we can do. And so it's about focusing on what is the here and now. And I think, to me, there are two main areas that are affecting the way money is flowing. So one is the macroeconomic environment, which, let's be honest, has been around for longer than the current US president has. So we can't blame too much on that new government. And that's been really challenging. Now, what we've seen is that with high interest rates, that has really affected the ability for companies to go public and for VCs to be able to invest because they can't free up money. And that's been a real challenge also for them to get new funds, because LPs are looking out around and saying, well, actually, I can get 5% on my cash by just sticking it into bonds or an account. Why should I go with something that's very risky, like cell and gene therapy, for goodness sakes, and put my money at risk? So we've had this really challenging financial environment, and that's starting to improve. We're starting to see the interest rates come down. We're hopefully going to start seeing some companies IPO. We've seen some acquisitions, very, very positive, but one does not a trend make. So let's not get too excited. But things are trending in the right direction. And so I think they will continue to move. What we're doing is we're now, with the change in government, we are facing some headwinds. And so those headwinds are a lack of consistency with strategy from the US government. So we're seeing a lot of flip-flopping around, and this makes investors nervous. When investors get nervous, they go towards safe ground, putting their money into safe places, and that doesn't necessarily benefit us. So what we need is a bit of consistency to go forward. But there are other mechanisms to keep companies going. And so it's not just a one-way ticket. We've got other mechanisms that we can utilize, and we just have to think about getting through the stage. This is a normal change. It's a normal variation in the way companies work. And it's ups and downs. We're a little bit down now. It will start coming back. We just need to hang on until it improves.
If you allow me, two comments. I agree with what Sven was saying, and probably I'm less concerned about a conservative agenda than I am concerned on how it's being implemented with ups and downs and uncertainty. But I wanted to go back to what you said before about managing your team and controlling what you can control. Probably, I think the most important thing a CEO needs to do is articulate the vision and the message. Where are we going and why are we doing it so that people get excited and passionate for the project they have? That's really the vision setting. And then the implementation of good housekeeping, project management, all of those things. All of that only happen if the team is behind you and behind the project and is passionate about what's doing.
Did you have a follow-on question?
Yeah, and at the risk of kind of moving forward and backward fairly often through the conversation, I do want to focus on the kind of financial environment we were just discussing. And what we're looking at the moment and kind of investor behavior and financial activity in the space, is this something that has stayed true to any predictions that could have been made towards the end of last year? Is this uncertainty actually expected uncertainty? And what are we kind of looking at for perhaps the next quarter to, or maybe even beyond? Is there anything that we've got faith in those kind of projections and predictions?
I think the investor in how the short answer is it depends. I think
Is it true?
nobody expected the first half of this year to be a massive sea change, to change back, and everyone to be showered in money, and for pixies and unicorns to be running around the cell and gene therapy space. I don't think anyone really expected that. Recovery is slow. This downturn has been particularly challenging and stubborn to do. So I think that's not unexpected. I think in general, we felt that the second half of this year was going to be when we start seeing some, and I hate the term green shoots of change, but we start seeing some improvements. We need to see more companies IPOing, and we need to see more private companies being taken off the private market so that money is returned to venture capitalists. They can return that to their LPs, they can replenish their funds, and they can move forward. So there are a number of things that need to happen for things to improve. No one expected it would be now. I think with the changes we've seen, there were a lot of hopes that with more deregulation in the US, with some of the initial promises made, that recovery would be faster. I think what we're seeing now with a more stubborn, higher interest rate in the US, that recovery will probably be slightly slower. Now, I think Miguel hinted at it. Does that mean that Europe might become the next fertile ground? And I think what we've seen is Europe's interest rates have been coming down, and things seem to be more friendly towards startups within Europe. The challenge that we have is there aren't any good exits within Europe. So no one is clawing to get onto the London Stock Exchange, or the German stock exchanges, or the Swedish stock exchange. Everyone still wants to move to the US. So that acts as kind of a barrier still. But I think we're going to see a lot more innovation in Europe, and we're going to see a lot more early funding coming in the meantime.
Not much more to add. I think the opportunity in Europe is to take advantage of the competition, because it will drive up the entire field, and it's Europe, US, and it's Asia. It's really getting back that confidence on the investment. Out of JP Morgan, people were kind of putting a brave face. I think that's good. We need to be optimistic. But I think it's also very important, looking at what Sven said, which I endorse, is be realistic and work hard at making it happen.
I think I completely agree with that. That I'm not expecting anything magical to happen in this year.
Unicorns.
No, I'm not expecting unicorns. I'm expecting hard work will pay off, and I'm expecting good therapies will get funded with good management teams, with with good data, and the times in 2020 when money was easy to come by, that's not coming back anytime soon. So back to this is the new normal. Let's get on with it.
Thank you. One topic that springs to my mind, and it seems probably a little bit harsh to focus on a single company, but the recent news of Bluebird Bio, has that had its own impact on this already uncertain environment? That there we have a scientific, a clinical success, but arguably a commercial wobble. That's putting it mildly. Do you feel that influence from that single acquisition, or is that just a bump in the road?
Well, I think probably one thing about life is constantly learn, right? And I think we've learned a couple of things there. First of all, probably the first learning is it's important to launch your products always with a market in view. Fantastic science, fantastic efficacy, it's only the starting point. You get a success of a commercial product if you're able to really prepare the market and launch it. I mean, I've done that on small molecules, biologics. You really need to educate, prepare the market, and do it well to get commercial success. If not, then you will pay the price. What we also saw with the acquisition recently is because the market is tough, companies are looking for alternative investment, and we're seeing quite a lot of BD and license. In other words, other ways to keep the lights on and running the business, and consequently, it's probably a buyer's market, and consequently, the valuations are probably a little bit on the low side. So there's a lot to learn, and it's leaders that suffer the first pain that help the followers to be successful.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think well, it is a buyer's market, and if you're desperate, you're not going to get a good deal. So if you don't have the time, then then that's what you're going to see. So yes, this is I don't see this as a major thing. It's just it's just more confirmation of the same story.
Okay, Sven.
Sadly, I think it's one of those news items that gets circulated around LPs and institutional investors, and it's a negative indicator to the space. I think anyone that's been in the field for a long time, it wasn't particularly shocking what had happened. I think it's allowed us to think about what are the lessons that we've learned from Bluebird. Bluebird has gone a few years ago. They were something like 8 billion. They were one of the most valuable companies, and they were really flying high. And to me, this really shows our move and our need to become more mature in a market. And so we've moved away from that. We've got a gene therapy, so ta-da, here you go, to we've got a gene therapy. This is another way of treating patients, but we cannot ignore the basics of educating the patients, of educating the payers, of follow-up, of really understanding what those patients are and what those patients need. And so this has really been elucidated by this company, the only company that has 3 approved autologous gene therapies for ultra rare and for rare diseases on the market. We would have all thought, how on earth could they have failed or have not been able to go forward? And so I think this is really an important stage where we need to start thinking about how do we compete with other therapies. So think about the therapies that they have and these indications. There are other ways of treating these indications. And just because we have a cool cell therapy or a gene therapy, or we can do X, Y, or Z, doesn't make us better than anyone else. We have to be able to prove it. So that's the one thing. I think the other thing, which was particularly sad, is in the last couple of months, they lost over 50% of their value because they could not secure that PRV. And this was a PRV that was, I don't want to say promised to them, but there was a reasonable expectation that they would get it. And they have tried 3 times, and they appealed against it, and they didn't get it. And that's really sad, because I think that's a lot of what really lost them a lot of their value. And if it wasn't for that, I think things would have looked a bit different.
Thank you very much.